So recently I've been getting quite a bit of comments asking me about the accent that I have when I speak English, and thereafter asking me how did I come to learn English to the level that I have, which at this point I am considered to be fluent. And to answer, my first language is Russian, and the tinges of the accent that you hear slipping through is Russian, especially when I'm tired or when I'm not filtering my speech as much. From the ages of 1 until 19, I grew up in Russia. And I wanted to make this video today to share with you, looking backwards, all the things that actually helped me with acquiring English and what propelled me forward. Because no matter how much I memorized, no matter how much grammar I was cramming, all the tutors I had, all the books I was reading, nothing ever clicked until it finally did. And all of the factors that contributed to this were done absolutely by myself, completely for free. So let's get right into that. Like many people, I had the basic foundations of the English grammar from school, and I also had a tutor when I was very, very young come in once a week or twice a week maximum to teach me additional grammar on top of that. But I had no interest in that, and the grammar did not stick with me. And the learning approach was to write out a word over and over and over again, and then to practice the grammatical syntaxes and sentences over and over again. It was horrendous. To a point where it didn't stick in my brain so much that for the longest time, when I was, I think, 6, I kept mixing up the words alligator and astronaut. At some point, the teacher was so frustrated with me and my lack of homework and my lack of retention of information, she just told me, we have to do something. What do you want to do? It has to be language related. And I loved illustrated children's book. Everything about that captured my imagination. And so I told her I'll be writing little stories for you, and the topic had to be open-ended. So I would draw my little paintings, draw my little storybook illustrations, and then I was so passionate in telling those stories and being very creative in the writing process, and then having the feedback from the tutor or from my mom or whoever was willing to listen to those silly little stories, that I used all the words I knew and didn't know in English, and I was really motivated to structure the sentences just right so that I had a reader to consume and to tell my story to. So that's actually what was bringing me to A1, A2 level, and at around that point I stopped seeing the tutor because my abilities kind of capped out at those storytelling, and my English language retention just was not progressing after a certain point, even with my little stories. So why am I telling you this story about the little children's book? I don't have a secret children's books out there that I would want you to purchase, but rather the important first step that I realized throughout my language acquiring journey was interest. If you go to any country in the world, Spain, China, New Zealand, and you look at the population of immigrants in that country, they're always split into roughly 2 categories. Ones who have acquired the language of the country they immigrated to, and ones who barely get by or don't know the language at all because they chose to stay within their community and not expose themselves further to the environment. And when you choose that comfort and you're not interested in interacting with the environment around you, it does nothing for you. So the environment doesn't affect the language learning as much as we think it does. It's more so how much do you choose to expose yourself and interact with the things you put in front of yourself, and what you put in front of yourself, and how do you get in front of those things. So what brought me to the next level was the fact that I actually really loved Harry Potter and Naruto. But back in the day, there wasn't that much content available in Russian. This kind of stuff was being translated at a slower pace, and then not many fan clubs were available or as much as in English. So I started slowly venturing out to consume more content on the English web, even though I wasn't understanding so much of the words there. And I found fan fiction, and you can judge me all you want, but I've never ever been happier than when I discovered it. I think I was around 12 or 13, and so I was just consuming one story after the other. And what's interesting about that is that I could pick any level of the author's language, because a lot of people were like me. English wasn't their first language, ESL people shout out, And so they wrote in their simple or broken English, and I was able to pick up a little bit here and there, depending if they were a little bit more advanced than me. And then also I loved Naruto, like I said, but not many things were available, or the translations from Japanese weren't coming as fast in Russian, so I started watching with English subs and slowly picking up certain words that were critical to understanding the dialogue. And even though my English was not good, it was definitely better than my Japanese. And so that's how I pushed through. Slowly from that, I got exposed more and more to English media, so books and TV shows based on those books, and the language and the word vocabulary started slowly expanding to fit the need for me to understand those stories. So the interest drove the desire to learn. And I want to give a special shout out actually to Jane Austen and Lord of the Rings trilogy, because those really helped me also going through this journey. Okay, this brings me to my third point, and that is don't stop too frequently, or don't burden yourself with just submersing yourself into perfect grammar or learning every word. In both examples I gave above from Naruto and Harry Potter, I learned the basics that I needed just to get the gist of it. I didn't have time to stop. I needed to know what happened next in the story, and that kept the learning very organic and very lively. I think a big part of why kids are able to pick up languages so quickly, besides their neuroplasticity, is because they're picking up those languages in the way that they were originally meant to be picked up, to communicate a message. So there's a desire and an immediate output and an immediate communication and usage of that language. I cold, I hungry. And as you go through picking up the language, you can fill out those gaps later on, rather than obsessing over being perfect. I think there's a common thread that you've noticed throughout this video, and this brings me to the last point, and that is the power of output. I talked about my homeschooling experiences in my previous video. Around the age of 12, my parents decided to re-enroll me into regular system, so they put me in an English-speaking school, and I felt like a sailor surrounded by water but unable to quench their thirst, because I was surrounded by all these words written and spoken that I understood from all of my consumption of that media. And that was actually one of the reasons why my parents decided to put me into an English-speaking school, because they saw how much I was consuming and how much I was understanding, but I was unable to communicate. And the extent of my knowledge was actually pretty advanced. In a classroom, I remember the teacher and the teacher's assistant were trying to remember a word, and all the kids were stumped because it was a bit of an unusual word for a color of blue. And after a few seconds of racking my brain through, I remembered and I said turquoise, and people were so surprised because I could barely put together a good grammatical sentence that I knew this word. It took me time to find that in my filing system. So I talk about my homeschooling experience in the previous video, but from that I became quite introverted, and I also didn't have that much of an access to people to practice my English with. So around that time I went back to my roots and I started writing little stories just for myself, I guess inspired from all the fanfics and all the books that I was consuming. Around that time I also re-entered for good the regular schooling system, so my parents put me in an English-speaking school. I entered that school with a lot of people around the same time who had the same language abilities as me. By the time of graduation, I was already at a fluent level, and a lot of those people weren't. Why? It's not because of any reasons except the fact that I had a much higher output and I knew the things that I liked and the things that interested me, so I just followed that passion. Not consciously, but now I realize what gave me the edge and what helped me acquire and make English language part of the fabric of my mind, basically. It's thanks to the English literature classes we had. So instead of English grammar, we had the typical North American class of English where we studied different books and different literature, and I really loved the books, and I loved writing essays and speaking about them in class because it felt like I was giving a spin to the stories that I've read. My own spin. I was sharing my opinion, I was synthesizing, I was processing the information, and for me to do that and to really understand the stories that I was so emotionally invested in, I had to learn some of the words, and I had to understand certain turns of phrases or turns of grammar to really just have it sink into my conscious. And so that output was so crucial. So look for the ways to create output for yourself. It can be a daily diary written in English just for yourself, just recounting your day. It can be a video that you record just of yourself. You can do a voice note. You can create a text conversation just with yourself about your day. Just anything to keep the interest and the output going so that you have easy access to these things rather than sitting around and trying to remember what is that specific color of blue, even though you have that in you already. In Russian, we say that practice is the mother of learning, and I do agree with that, but mindless repetitive practice may help you perfect certain grammatical things, but it will yield much slower returns. To summarize, make sure to at least get to a certain level of A1, and that is easily achievable with all the free lessons you can find online. So get to A1. Prioritize engaging with the language only through things that interest you, or mainly through things that interest you. It can be books, and it could be podcasts, it could be even shorts, it could be makeup videos, anything that captures your interest and your imagination. 2, don't slow down if you don't understand something. Just grab enough so you can understand and whiz through. The learning will come through osmosis. And 3, find ways for an output. Write stories, record messages, shout into the world, to talk to a pillow. Do something that you like to create that output, and ideally you would want to either enjoy the output for yourself, or you have an audience or your family members or friends who consume it. In this learning journey, I wish you all the best, all the success. I hope you find all the media that interests you. It is so exciting to acquire this wondrous language. English language opens so many opportunities in this day and age, in terms of career, in terms of connecting with people, in terms of learning about the world, in terms of all the books, all the media you can consume, all the peculiar characters that you can learn about on the web. And I'm so happy you found this video, and I hope it guides you and helps you in your learning journey. And I hope you stick around. Maybe give me a like, maybe drop me a comment. I would love to hear your opinion and how far you've come in English. Maybe comment in your first language down below, and I'll see you in the next video in our knowledge sharing journey. Take care.